This is the YOB ConvoCast, one-on-one conversations with your other brother's authors, community members, supporters, and friends.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home. When I'm with you, I'm right where I belong. I'm already home.
What's up, friends, and welcome back to the YOB ConvoCast, conversations with our adventurous YOB community. My name's Tom. I'm the co-founder, editor of YOB, and we're a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. And we are smack dab in the throes of a summer series called At Home, exploring how where we live, the places that we call home, intersect with our faith, with our sexuality, and with our masculinity. And it's been really fun to start to get some legs on this series now after I've interviewed a few people and very different situations already. Diversity is already forming. And I'm excited for the conversation today because we will talk about this guest's home, like his physical home, because I'm curious to learn about the walls behind him. And there's a plant I can see crawling down his bookshelf or dresser behind him or something. So we'll talk about that. But I'm kind of also intrigued by more of an existential home and more of a geographical home for the journey that he's taken. So excited to learn all the scoop today from today's guest. He's a returning guest. He talked about Heartstopper last time. Maybe we'll talk about Heartstopper again. It's our other brother, Andrew. What's up, Andrew?
Hey, Tom. I'm so glad to be back.
You're back. So great. Has Heartstopper come back yet? Or is this next season, is it coming? I feel like it's coming, isn't it?
Yes, it has not been released yet. I have the date in my phone and I can't remember when. It's soon. It's soon. So I'm very excited.
It's soon. Okay, everybody, get ready.
Yes, soon, TM.
I remember seeing a trailer for it, and we had a great conversation about it. We talked about the show, but then we also kind of focused and keyed in on asexuality. All of our hardcore listeners, they know where it is. I'll put the link to the episode in the show notes. But if anyone's curious about hearing our thoughts, not only about the TV show on Netflix, but then also about asexuality. I'm glad you're back to join us for the At Home series. So excited to talk to you again, Andrew.
Yeah, me too. I feel like I don't have that interesting of a home life, but so when you were like, hey, you want to talk on the podcast? I'm like, oh, okay, sure. I'd love to. So.
Yeah. Let's start small. Where do you live right now as far as the room behind you, and what's going on? Where are you right now in this life, in this world?
Okay. So currently I am living in San Diego, California, with a straight roommate. Shocking. I never thought I would be in this situation. But I just moved about a month and a half ago from an apartment I was renting by myself. And I was like, I just need to save some money. So that was a motivator.
California ain't cheap, I mean, lots of places ain't cheap, but California in particular. I know. I used to be out there myself. So where did this straight boy come from? Did he come just from the internet, or do you know him already, or what's his deal? What's his story?
He's a friend. He was in our friend group out here. I could not just bunk with some random stranger from the internet. I mean, no shade to the people who do, but that just stresses me out so much.
So this is the siren call now to our listeners. If you live with a Craigslist boy, straight boy from Craigslist, hit me up and let's get your story involved in this series, because I think that presents another perspective that we're currently lacking. So we'll see. And how's that going so far?
Pretty good. We're both over the age of 30, so we're both relatively adults, and we're it's nice. We both are introverts, so it's like there's kind of this understanding of like, oh, when you come home, you're not going to be expected to carry on conversation. You can just relax or go to your room or whatever, and that's really nice.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, at some point in this series, there's a mutual friend, someone that that I'm going to talk to about living with multiple straight boys, and so I think that's going to be ripe with some stories and conversations there, because this I guess is a spoiler alert or a teaser that someone else is coming down the pipeline to talk to with living with multiple straight men for for at least a year or two. I don't know. I don't have him here, so I don't know how long that situation's been going. But because you're only a month, because you're only a month and a half into this, there's not really much to grill you on as far as this particular living situation. Although, if any stories come to mind, please share. Has anything interesting happened in a month and a half? Can you think of something just totally enthralling?
Something totally
No pressure.
enthralling. We had a falling out, a mini fight over a piece of furniture that we had, one of those little footstools that went to his couch. And I was like, I'm sorry, there's no room in the living room for it. We're not having this out here. And he was like, well,
Whoa.
where am I going to put it? I'm like, that's on you. That's you. You brought it here. I'm saying as the interior decorator of this apartment, it has to go. So
wow. So you stood your ground.
It's messing with the feng shui. Mm-hmm. I did.
And did you win? You won then?
I did. Yes. It's no longer in sight. I don't know where it is, but I
was
don't
going to
care.
say, where is it? Is it just a random ottoman or a random footstool in his bedroom now? Or because you could use that as like a shelf or something.
Well, we were using it as like extra guest seating for when people came over.
Oh yeah. Just like a seat. Yeah. It's like an extra
Yeah.
seat. Why not?
Exactly.
Yeah. Just throw that thing in the closet, bring it out when you have guests over, and you got an extra chair. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, please keep us posted if any developments come up with the furniture and the feng shui of everything. That's really important. I'm glad you're there to keep things in order.
Yes, me too. Well, you'll be the first to know if any developments
The first to
arise.
know. Yes, I'm excited. Something that really drew me to you and to your story is because it's a reflection of mine in a lot of ways, because you've had a little bit of journey getting to San Diego, getting to Southern California. Like, tell us where you grew up and tell me about your life. How did you get there? How did you get in Southern California right now?
Wow. Okay. Well, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and spent most of my life there, 30 something years. And it was just kind of one of those things. I was like, well, I was born here. I'm going to die here. You know, it'd be nice to move somewhere else, but I don't really think that's going to happen. Anyway, it's a nice enough place. I did enjoy it. But ever since my family went to Southern California on a trip in high school, I was always like, I would love to live in SoCal. But at the time it was kind of like, I'm going to go to the moon. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I want to be an astronaut. It's like, well, it's nice that you have that thought, but it's never going to happen. So, so fast forward to 2021, which was 2022. And I was talking to, it was just a rough year in a lot of ways. Like the church I was in fell apart. The friend group I had fell apart. My grandma passed away. And so it was a really difficult year with a lot of loss. And I was talking to a friend back in Dayton, and he was like, what would it look like if you were to move to San Diego or Southern California? He's like, just as a way to kind of get you out of your funk and to, give you something to move towards. He's like, whether or not it actually happens, like, what would that look like? And I was like, oh, I'd never actually considered that as an option. But so I slowly put feelers out. And at this point, I knew 2 yobbers out in San Diego from when I had visited a couple of years ago. And so I was like, okay, that's a good selling point. I know people out there. And I looked for jobs. I found a job out there. And so it just kind of felt like the Lord was saying, yes, the door to where you're currently living is closing and the door to San Diego is opening. And so I moved across the country in January of 2023. I actually did a road trip out there with my dad, of all people.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. That was kind of like a backup to the backup plan. I'm like, well, I don't really want to drive across the country by myself because I want to do like a road trip. And so my friend was like, oh, I'd really love to, but I can't. And then my second choice fell out, and I was like, hey, what about my brother? He's like, no, I don't want to do this. And so I'm like, all right, Dad, how are you feeling about a road trip to San Diego?
Wow.
With a car full of junk. So
It's unfortunate that not everybody in this life can drop everything they're doing for like a week, because it's going to take a few days. It's going to take a few days to get from Ohio to California, or in my case, because I also moved to California as a 20 something in from Georgia to California. And I think it took me 5 or 6 days to get out there. So it's a little bit of a commitment for someone if you want to have someone road trip with you. But that's cool. So you've been over there for a year and a half now, about?
yeah, year and a half.
Year and a half, and you've got a thriving little Yobbers community there. I got to hang out with you guys on a trip last year to visit for a weekend, and just to get a glimpse of your world and just to see, all the connections that are happening out there. So that's a great picture of growing up somewhere where you felt a lot of darkness, or you used the word funk, like, and then to go somewhere that's literally full of sunshine, and to come here to have a new chapter. Yeah, that's kind of the crux of our episode, is the concept of leaving home and creating a new home somewhere else. Because I imagine most of the series will focus on like the living situations and the combinations of people. And like I said, if any other stories come up, Andrew, please let me know. But yeah, I really want to focus on that, because I think a lot of people just don't give themselves permission. Like, oh, there's this beautiful place that I loved, that I visited once, or that I've heard a lot of good things about, or a lot of Yobbers live there. If there's people in our community, or side B people, if you know other sources or outlets where you know people, but I can't just move across the country and start over. Like, I can't do that. Like I think a lot of people, and I was one of them for the longest time. Like, I'm going to live and die here. I think you put it very well. Like, I thought I was just going to live and die in Georgia. And I just felt like, well, what other hope is there? Where else can I go? And so the fact that a friend suggested that and you followed through on that is really inspiring to me. I'm glad that you did that. I'm curious if the Yobbers, were they just icing on the cake? Were you going to go out there anyway? What was kind of the decision-making process to finally decide, I'm going to move thousands of miles away from all I've ever known?
Well, I think in my mind, it was always kind of like, I don't want to move to a place unless I know at least one person there, just to kind of make entry easier and to get connected faster. Because I'd heard horror stories about people who moved and with nobody they knew, and it was like they were just lonely and it was hard to connect to people. And so I was like, okay, that's going to be my the one condition before I move somewhere. I have to know somebody there. And so, yeah, I actually met the two guys I know out here during the pandemic, when I joined YOB, and I was a pandemic baby, and we really connected. I visited them, and I do have a fun story about that at some point, and we really connected, and I was like, yeah, I really like these guys. I went and visited them, had a great time. And that was really what kind of started the wheels turning of, oh, this might actually be possible. And at that point, it was like, oh, well, in a couple of years, or like 5 years or something like that. It wasn't, oh, maybe in 2 years or a year I will be moving. So, but that was definitely a major impetus.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, because I remember when I moved to California, I knew one person. That was the definitive factor, I guess, of like transplanting my life thousands of miles away. It was knowing one person from the internet that I'd met once in my life, and and just being in such a miserable place. It speaks to where I was. Maybe it speaks a little bit to where you were, because that is a big decision. It's one thing to move across the city or across the state an hour or two away, but to like go to like 3 time zones away. I mean, that's a big jump. It's a big jump to make. What was your, going back to Ohio, OHIO, what was like your climate for home before things got into the funk that you went into? Like, I don't know, like growing up, what was your family life? What was your faith life? Just anything that conjures up images of home, either positively or not so positively, if you care to share. What was it like growing up there because you said for 30 something years you grew up there?
Yeah. So it was, I feel like I had a pretty good childhood up to, a certain point, which we'll get to. But my parents, I had a pretty stable childhood, like parents who were married with siblings and like family nearby. And that to me, it felt very safe. Like, but as I've gotten older, I've realized that it was very insular. And like we were the kind of family that like could have fun together, but we didn't go below the surface. And so as I got older, it was like hit puberty and kind of was exposed to these strange new feelings of sexuality. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And since we really didn't interact with anyone at that time, we were in between churches, and it was pretty much we just stayed at home because I was homeschooled.
Ah, the plot thickens.
Yes, you're right. It's like, well, the only time I see someone is when we go to the grocery store. That's kind of
It's a big socializing event. I was homeschooled for 2 years, and I'm convinced that ruined me socially. Just for 2 years.
My brother thinks that too.
Yeah.
But hey, I was homeschooled up through high school when I graduated, and
Wow.
I feel like I'm doing pretty good socially.
I would have never
you know.
guessed that. Yeah, that speaks a lot to you. You overcame some adversity there as far as social limitations there.
I did. So, but yeah, it was definitely it could be lonely at times. As I was, especially in high school. And so there was distance there. And where I would have said, oh yeah, I'm really close with my parents, my siblings, it kind of became more of, oh, I'm just sharing a house with these people.
Mm-hmm.
So
were you living at home up until your 30s, or had you moved out and lived in another situation before you left?
no, I lived on campus when I went to college.
Okay.
And then I moved back home for like 9 months or something before I found an apartment. And then I lived by myself in an apartment for about 5 years.
Okay. And I know when I stayed with you, you were living by yourself there too. So real quick, I guess, like what was the vibe living by yourself? Did you enjoy it? Was it mostly great, but also lonely? Was it mostly not great and sometimes good? Like, how would you describe your time living alone, I guess, compared both of those places from Ohio to California?
Well, as a social introvert, I usually spend my days talking to people and being socially active. And so it's so nice to just be able to come home and there's no one to talk to. I can just crash and be as introverted as I want. So I really enjoy living alone. And I probably would still be living alone if I didn't, if California wasn't so expensive. So
right. If you had Wyoming rent prices.
Right. Exactly. Kansas.
Yeah. Shout out to our desolate places. Maybe we'll get somebody from Wyoming one day. It's my dream. It's my dream to get a Wyoming yobber. So yeah, so going back to Ohio then, like what was that like growing up? Cause I resonate with that, growing up in a family that did a lot of fun things together and growing up in the faith, even a couple of years of homeschooling, throwing that in there too. Like there's a lot of overlap between your story and my story. Cause I resonate with not having that place to go to the deep end with conversations, certainly about sexuality, but then other things with puberty and other fun conversations about uncomfortable topics and things. So I don't know, what was it like going through that or coming out of that? Or do you feel like you were able to come out of that with your family and where you lived in Ohio? Or has California given you just like a new chapter basically?
Yeah, it's definitely, as I became more aware of, my sexuality and all the ways that I was different from my family, because I always joke that I'm the rainbow sheep of the family. It felt suffocating. And like, I mean, I still love them dearly, but I need a distance. I'm like, I can't be around you all the time because we're so different. And I feel like I can't be myself around you. And so that was, even when I was moved back after college, there was just this sense of like, I need space. So that was me wanting to get my apartment, and I had that. And then I was like, oh, should I move, to a nearby city just to get some more space? And so moving to California was, I think, the space that I needed of like, I can be my own person and not worry about like, oh, is somebody that my parents know going to report back? It's like, oh, Andrew was wearing this tank top that I don't, blah, 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 or something. And then I get a talking to from my mother. Like, well, so it's been nice to just have some space, to just kind of be more comfortable with who I am and not have to look over my shoulder, or second guess everything.
Yeah. Are you open with your family about sexuality, or is that something you're not really open about?
So I'm out to all of my immediate family, but it's not something we talk about. It's like with most things, we don't go below the surface. So it's like, oh yeah, we know that you experienced this, but we're not going to talk about it or ask any questions or anything like that. Which is honestly, it's kind of painful because it's like you don't care. To me, it seems like you don't care enough to ask and to learn more about me and my experience. You just come to me with your problems or with what you want to talk about, and I just kind of get pushed to the side. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. What was the reaction when you said you would be moving to California, and then your dad rode with you, obviously? So I'm curious, just how was that received? Was it received okay? Was it received not well at first, but they came around? Or what was that like?
It came as a shock, I think. Because I'd been kind of hinting about it. I was like, oh, I'm thinking about moving to California. Like, oh, I'm applying for jobs in San Diego or this and that. And so I don't think any of them actually thought it was going to happen. And then when I was like, oh, hey, I have a job and I found an apartment. I think my dad I was obviously sad, but I think he was living vicariously through me of like, yeah, you're going on to a new adventure. Like, I'm excited for you. My mom was definitely very sad and she still kind of guilt trips me about it. She's like, you could move back. You don't have to live out there first, or like whenever you end up moving back or this and that. And so I'm like, well, I'm sorry, Mom.
That's what moms are for. Moms are for the guilt trip. Yeah, that was like my parents' reaction too. When I told them that I had this friend with a room opening up and like that it was sort of an option. And then I don't think there was much conversation about it. And then it was like maybe a week or two later, I just basically told them, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm moving across the country. And I think similar to you, I don't remember my dad ever resisting or like saying, why are you doing this? Or you can't do this, or, have you thought about this and this and this? Versus my mom, who was like, yeah, convinced that this was just a wild fantasy that I was thinking about and that surely I'm not going to actually do it. But I was like, no, I'm ready to go. I'm not going to stay here and just languish. I'm no longer languishing. So exactly. that was my parents' reaction too. So I didn't have my dad ride with me though. That would have been an interesting twist to have somebody ride with me all the way across the country like that.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was good because I think we connected more on the trip out. And it was just because I feel like I'm closer with my dad than I am with my mom. I feel like I'm in the minority in that respect. But yeah, it was just a good way to connect. We went to like the Grand Canyon and Painted Desert. And so just being able to, and we didn't talk too much, but just to be able to exist together in the same space was really good. It was really healing from some of the hurts. So, but yeah, I think my mom, going back to your point, I think my mom still believes that I moved out to California to, live my big fat gay lifestyle. And I'm just living this life of debauchery and going to clubs every night. And like, sorry, I'm in bed by 9 p.m., Mom. I'm not going to the clubs.
You are living a crazy life out there. Craziness everywhere. Yeah. I mean, I think it's cool that this is an increasingly common story that I'm hearing. That's why I'm glad I'm getting to talk to you today. Because like, as people get to connect on the internet and build connections with other people, like that wasn't the sole determining factor necessarily for you moving out there. But the fact that must have been a comfort to know that you had these other friends within YOB that would help you kind of have a sense of community as you got planted and as you got secure and as you, built a resume of living out there. And I know even Alex, who's been on this show, like she shares that in common with us as well, of moving across the country from growing up on the East Coast. And now he's also a SoCal SoCal boy. You guys are so like convicting to me as like, wait, did I make a big mistake? Should I have stayed out there? Because I lived out there for 4 years, and I've thought about that. Like, what if YOB had started while I was still living in Southern California, and you guys all came like one by one? I got to welcome you to my land, the jewel of the South Pacific. I don't know, whatever we would call it, but I don't know. Never say never, Andrew. Like, you never know. You never know if I might make a second exodus out there. Who knows? Who knows what this life will bring?
West Coast, best coast.
But now, yeah, it's like when you joined. I mean, there've been at least a few new guys who have joined YOB in the meantime, and I'm sure you've met other people through other friends of friends and groups and things that you've been a part of. So that's got to be a really affirming part of living out there. In addition to just getting some space from where you grew up, just there's that element, getting away from where you came from, but then also now you get to like open up a new box and see what's inside.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was a big impetus for me to leave, was just needing more side B community or more queer community. Because I didn't really have that where I was. I knew people, but they were, several hours away. So it wasn't like, oh, we can just get dinner together, or just like, oh, hey, I have nothing going on tonight. You want to hang out? So that was a big reason for leaving. And I think that's been so wonderful to find out here.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's a really great place. Like I said, I enjoyed my time the weekend that I spent out there. I'm sure I will make another temporary trip. We'll see about a longer term trip, but at least another temporary trip in the semi near future. I think that would be fun. Is there anything else about Ohio that you care to talk about, or shall we just focus on SoCal? Anything else about where you came from versus where you are now?
Not really. People ask me, oh, do you miss Ohio? And I'm like, I miss a couple of restaurants and one of my friends, but that's about it.
Okay. Do you visit often or at all, or how? It's only been a year and a half, but yeah, have you been back?
Yeah, I have been, honestly, more than I wanted to.
Okay.
But yeah, I have been back a couple times.
And what's that been like? Has it been good? Has it been like you just can't wait to get back home, quote unquote, now to California? Like, what's the vibe when you go back home?
Yeah, it's definitely a culture shock. Like, the first time I went back was definitely like, oh, this is so different than SoCal, and just in a lot of different ways. So I've had good trips back where I've been like, oh, maybe I should have, maybe I'd like to move back here someday. And other trips where I was like, I can't wait to get out of here. I'm never moving back here. I think the most recent trip was for Revoice in Columbus, and I was like, yeah, no, I think I've moved beyond Ohio.
Yeah, and now you're in California, so I definitely want to explore what that looks like. You've mentioned one joy, which is just having more side B or having more queer community more readily accessible, because I know there is a shout out to this person in the Midwest that I know misses you dearly, that I know he was sad when you left the region, but you've now gained all these new friendships and connection points over there. So I imagine that's a source of joy in your life. What are some other joys about where you live now, before we get to challenges or limitations or things that maybe are difficult about where you are now?
Oh gosh, there's so many wonderful things about living out here.
Tell me why Southern California is so great. Yeah, tell all the people if they don't know what this paradise is.
Well, my seasonal depression has never been better. Like, it's great. Sun for most of the year is just phenomenal. The weather is beautiful. It doesn't ever get below freezing. I'm near the ocean. I can see mountains every day on my way to work. Like, the people here are friendly. And I know SoCal gets a bad rap for like unfriendly people, but I feel like that's largely LA. But
shade to LA. Take that, Alex.
He knows how I feel about it. So I love you, Alex, but we can agree to disagree. But yeah, great food. I just really have it's nice to be around people who kind of agree with me on a lot of things. So um, without getting too into the weeds, it's Ohio tends to be very, or the circles I ran in tended to be more like politically conservative. And so it's nice to be in a place where I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to argue with people that yes, it's important to recycle. They just get it. So that's nice.
Okay. I was wondering what example you would use to get into political talk, which we generally avoid here in these circles, but that's acceptable. You can talk about. I think if anyone out there disagrees that recycling isn't good, please email Alex. You can just email Alex. I'll direct you to someone else involved in YOB, but I'll agree with you.
Don't call the YOB line.
Don't call the YOB. Yeah, the poor YOB line. No one's called it in so long. We'll get it back. We'll get it back at some point. But yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, like the cliffs and the beaches in San Diego, LA too, to another extent, but San Diego in particular, it's a beautiful part of America. Absolutely. You're in a good place aesthetically.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it really helps too that I have such a good community, because I know the two Yobbers, and then I kind of got introduced to the SoCal Yob community, and they're all lovely people. But I also got introduced to like friends of friends, and like straight people, queer people who aren't in Yob, and like I have a wonderful church, and so it's just so amazing to be around people where I don't have to put on a face. I can just, whatever that looks like, even not even in respects to my like queerness. It's just, oh, I can be having a bad day and I can go to a party and just be like honest, like I have had a really bad day and I'm not feeling up for it, and people are just gonna embrace me with open arms and be like, yeah, I get it, instead of, oh well, you just need to lighten up or whatever. So that's been really, really huge. It's just people who have encouraged me and built into me. And not that I didn't have that in Ohio, but it just, I don't know, it feels different.
Yeah.
Probably because they know the full me, so they can more adequately help me or pour into me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to get a clean slate. I think about that a lot. There's such a balance because my problem is I constantly want a clean slate. It's like every year, let's just live somewhere else and start over. And that can be adventurous for a while. And it was adventurous for a while in my 20s. And then I got into my 30s, and all of a sudden that gets really exhausting mentally, emotionally, just the thought of constantly, it's like taking an eraser board and just like erasing it again. And now I've got to build a new friendship circle and a new church and a new group of people. And so there was some value in that in my 20s, like getting a lot of life experience and meeting lots of different types of people and going to different churches and putting myself out there in ways that I certainly never did on the East Coast. But to be able to like start to settle down and make some roots. And that's not to say I'll be here in Asheville forever. Who knows? But for this season that I'm in, however long this season lasts, it's been a good thing for me to settle in. And so I'm curious if you've thought about that. If you think like, we'll talk about limitations in a second, but yeah, I'm curious if you thought that far ahead, like, am I going to live here the rest of my life, or is that just something you just live? Are you just one of those healthy people that just live in the present and don't think about the future? What have you thought about that?
I don't think healthy has been a term that people use to describe me very often. But it's funny you bring that up, because I have, like, ever since turning 30, I've been like, oh, where do I want to settle down? Before I was kind of like, oh, I have to get out of here. I want to just change. I want something different. I want to see the world. And now I'm like, it might be nice to have a house with a garden and like settle down somewhere, get some roots. Would that be San Diego? I would love it to be, but I'm not going to be able to afford a house out here because it's too expensive. So unless there's an act of God that gives me a house, like a house just falls from the sky with a title attached to it, then, but I don't know, I'm just kind of being hopefully anticipatory about the future. And like, I'm going to enjoy where I'm at for as long as I can. And then when and if the time to move comes along, then I will approach that with joy and anticipation. So it's kind of, yeah, kind of being content, but also holding it loosely.
Yeah. I'm sure there are many a millennial listening right now that are also not able to afford a home and they don't live in San Diego. So I'm sure we are in good company. I'm certainly one of them. So yay, millennials. Okay. So what are the challenges about being where you are? Certainly there's the financials of maybe things are more expensive where you are compared to where you grew up. So I don't know. What are some other just challenges of where you live there in San Diego these days?
There's definitely people back home that I miss. I have a good straight friend who still lives in Ohio that I do miss a lot. I keep trying to convince him to move out here. And then the aforementioned Yobber, who I left, I do miss him a lot.
Glad we were able to verbalize that so he knows that. So there we go.
Yes,
good job.
yes, I love him dearly and I miss him. Yeah, every now and then I kind of get these like, oh, am I being selfish for moving across the country and leaving most of my family back in Ohio? And so that does come up from time to time. But I feel like for the most part, it's been all positives. I guess one other negative is just the because San Diego is such an expensive, Southern California is such an expensive place to live. It's kind of like there's some uncertainty that comes with renting of like, oh, is the rent going to be raised higher enough that I'm going to have to move again in next year or the year after? Or is my roommate going to, get married and I'm going to have to find somebody else or move? And so that's been kind of, I haven't been a fan of that. I would like a little bit of stability. But I'd say overall, it's been just really positive and a lot of good things.
That's good. That's great. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see people like there's such a list of people that both in YOB and outside of YOB who have done what you've done, and I always applaud the bravery because it's a big deal to make that jump and to start over somewhere. But it looks like you're figuring it out, and it's cool to see you figuring things out. When you look at your life from Ohio to where you are now, like, do you feel like you're going in a 180 completely different direction as far as what you're trying to build or what you're trying to find? Because I know you referenced the concept of maybe like you had to accommodate people or you had to play the part or you couldn't really be fully yourself where you were growing up. And now you're able to do that where you live now. Like, I guess, how would you compare and contrast where you grew up and where you are now, as far as certainly relationships, but anything else that comes to mind? Yeah, what kind of home are you making? Are you replicating what you grew up with, or are you tearing down the walls and building something new? It seems like it's more of the latter, from what I can gather.
Yeah. Ever since I went away to college, I've been kind of searching for this nebulous idea of home and what does that look like? What does it look like to have a place you call home? Because home stopped being home after, once I hit high school. So it's kind of been moving in the other direction of like, okay, this is how I grew up. What does home look like in a way that's not that, and I think this idea of found family has always been kind of attractive to me just because my own family, while I love them dearly, stopped feeling safe and restful and stable after a certain point. And so that's kind of what I've been looking for in, an idea of home now. Like, can I find that now as a single man in my 30s?
Yeah. Safe, stable, and restful. Those are good adjectives to look for in a home or to build a home with. Because, the deeper this series goes, it feels more and more relevant. I wasn't sure about it at first, but it feels so relevant because that comes up on our Discord and our discussions a lot. It's like, who's going to be there for me when I'm 85 years old and like I have to go to a nursing home or I need care or, whatever the dramatic scenario might be. We don't know what the future holds, but I mean, it's as I enter my now late 30s, like it's something that I'm starting to like think a little bit more about like, what does home look like if the traditional model of a wife and kids is not available, or if that's just not the story God's writing for me. Like, what does that mean? Does it mean living by myself? Does it mean, I mean, it certainly means being connected to humans, but like how, and what does that look like? To what extent? And do I have to move across the country to find it? And maybe so, but I love that you're starting to piece that together now, coming out of Ohio, because whether you're there the rest of your life or not, like you're definitely learning what your heart is yearning for. And that's a huge thing. I think it's like, just to get out of Ohio and just to be where you are now, whether you're there the rest of your life or not, like you're discovering what your heart's yearning for. And this concept of found family, chosen family, like that is a beautiful thing to find and tap into and connect with. So it's really cool. It's really cool to hear that you're discovering that out there in this new chapter of your life.
Yeah. I have a straight friend she's always like, well, we need to just make a commune somewhere. Like we're just going to buy a plot of land and build tiny houses. And I'm like, some days I'm like, absolutely not. There's no way I would do that. And other days I'm like, that sounds amazing. So, if all else fails, we can form a commune somewhere.
I know a guy with a farm in the Washington DC area, so he's living his best life at 65, which is I get so inspired every time I talk to Marshall on his farm with his commune adjacent lifestyle. It's quite something to behold. There's something about that. Like I'm processing a life like that. Like that could be cool if it's the right structure. Like it'd have to be the right people and the right layout and everything. Like I'm open to something like that one day. It kind of speaks, being an Enneagram 4, like I love the idea of a unique living situation, something that someone would raise their eyebrows and be like, what, where do you live? Who's there? What's your situation? So there's part of me that feels a little perk of enthusiasm when I think about something like that. But that could also be very exhausting and draining and not conducive to rest. What were the adjectives? Stability and rest and safety. Yeah, safety. Everything would have to be working on all cylinders there in that situation. As we wind down, Andrew, let's focus on that phrase "at home," and let's just talk about like what's conjured up for you when you hear that phrase "at home," and then with respect to your faith, with respect to your sexuality, with respect to your masculinity, like where are you at on that continuum as far as feeling a sense of at-homeness or contentment, belonging, peace, however you want to define it. But choose your own adventure. I always invite my guests in this series to start wherever you'd like in those three arenas that we tackle here in YOB.
Yeah. So I think faith and sexuality, I feel pretty much at home. Like I've had a long time to kind of sort through my sexuality and figure out, okay, all the different quirks and ways that I tick. And so, I mean, it's been nearly 2 decades since I realized that I was gay, and then about almost 1 decade since I realized that I was asexual. And so I've had a lot of time to kind of sit with that and think through it. And so I feel pretty comfortable in that. And my faith as well, that's been the one constant throughout everything. Like my one safe place, has been, Jesus, and just having that familiar fallback, whether or not I like myself today, whether or not other people like me today, Jesus still loves me and he cares about me. So I think those two have been, I feel very much at home, which I'm very thankful for, because there's definitely been times in my life that I have not been as at home in both of those areas.
You mentioned church out there too. Like, do you feel support kind of aligning with faith and sexuality to that degree? Like, do you feel like you're able to be open with people at your church, or that you're accepted at your church and able to be authentic with them as well, in addition to all the other people that you've met?
Yes. I'm really blessed to have a church that has a really large side B community.
Oh, nice.
And our pastor always says, he's like, I want this church to be the gayest church in San Diego. So it's definitely a unique place. And I love, I could just be myself. Like a couple Sundays ago, I read scripture and I was wearing pink pants and a bright pink floral shirt. And like I had my ear cuff on and I was very not straight presenting, and they were like, "Hey, you want to go read scripture?" So it's so wonderful.
Nice. Yeah. That doesn't make you feel at home. I don't know what would. Yeah, that's amazing.
Exactly.
And so I can't help but notice that you left masculinity on the sidelines of that conversation. So now my ears are perked up and I'm curious, what about masculinity maybe do you not feel as at home with, or do you, and you're just teasing me?
No, I would never tease you, Tom.
I enjoy a nice tease. I like to be roped along.
So yeah, I think masculinity has always been kind of an interesting thing for me, as someone who was never very masculine, even as a kid. Like I've always been skinny and very emotional, and higher pitched voice. I don't have traditionally male interests. So it's always kind of been a weird thing of grappling with, am I a man? Not even like in a dysphoric kind of way, but just like, what does a man mean? And am I a man or am I still just a boy,
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes and goes. I think right now I'm in a period of being aware of how unlike other men I can be, or that people view me as. And I think that kind of got started when I went back to Ohio this last time, and just had some unpleasant experiences with people. And it just really made me aware of how much people have a disdain for femininity in whatever, in all ways, and I'm thankful for it because it kind of gave me a new appreciation for the struggle that women have to go through every day, and our YOB sisters have to put up with. And I actually had some good conversations during that trip. But yeah, it just kind of made me aware of like, oh yeah, I don't fit in a lot of areas, and people view me as a threat just because I don't fit in their little box. So I think I usually have two reactions to that when I experience that kind of othering. One is to just kind of retreat and to, act more masculine, or to code switch or what have you. And I think the other reaction is to just get angry and be like, well, I'm going to be extra femme just to spite you, which neither of those are necessarily healthy. But so I think it's something that I'm not uncomfortable in my masculinity, such as it is, but it's also something that I've been very conscious about recently. And I've been doing a lot of processing about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So because you've mentioned throughout this conversation, like at least a couple different straight friends from Ohio to California, like, do you feel comfortable with them? And is it more so just like acquaintances or complete strangers that maybe you feel a sense of unmasculine? Is that more of the case? Or do you feel that way also with people that you would call straight friends as well, or other friends that present more the traditionally masculine features?
That's a good question. I think it's mostly like strangers or just acquaintances that I don't really know that well. Like the straight friends in my life, I love them dearly, and I don't feel like I have to be someone else around.
Right.
But there are people in my life, like, my family, some of my extended family members, people that I used to go to church with, that I do feel othered by or uncomfortable around. So I think that's just kind of a mix.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an interesting spectrum that men come in all shapes and sizes. And even within YOB, like the retreat is such a picture of this, of like tall yobbers, like literally so tall, like 6'6", like some of these yobbers are gigantic, like tall yobbers, short yobbers. We have our older yobbers, our younger ones, our smattering of married ones and a couple dads thrown in there, and a lot of single ones. And and masculine, quote unquote, for whatever that means, presenting, but then maybe not as masculine presenting, but yeah, we're all joined together in this place at this retreat. I'm using the retreat as a specific location or as an example of our greater community, but it's such an interesting picture to me of like, yeah, all of the different, probably, I bet you if you were to like chart our voices, you mentioned your voice like being of a higher pitch. Like, I bet if you put all of our voices in a row, like it would be like an xylophone, and you'd probably hear like I'm confident you would hear every single note of an xylophone, and all of that is represented in our community too. And yeah, we're all your other brothers, and we're all in this community, and we're all following Jesus together. And I don't know. There's just I think something that's so masculine about our community is the sense of belonging that, like there's nobody that's too masculine or too effeminate or too, I don't know, whatever other categories there are. Like there is room in this tent for people wherever they feel they do or do not belong. And I've been on my own journey too, because I always tell people I've struggled way more with my masculinity than I have with my faith and sexuality. And that's not everybody's story. But that is mine too. Just like figuring out where do I belong in the world of men, because there is this simultaneous desire to like adapt and morph myself and belong with them and just blend in with them and become one of them. But then also, again, Enneagram 4 alert, just to like stand out and be unique. Like I have a floral shirt now. I used to not have a floral shirt, but I have a floral shirt now. And every once in a while I break it out because I just want to like stir the pot a little bit, remind people that I'm different, I'm not going to wear just the solid green polo or solid blue polo shirt or whatever. I was trying to think of the most like frat boy shirt that I could imagine. Just like, what's that? Like Vineyard Vines or something. I don't know. Like,
oh, yep. American Eagle.
American Eagle. Yeah. Like there's no shame in like, standing out a little bit and bending the boxes a little bit, like giving room. Like masculinity is not a cube, like a rigid cube that only these certain types of people fit into. And I always appreciate, I appreciate people being honest about their struggles with it, but then by virtue of your just admitting that and being vulnerable, like that's to me the most masculine thing. Can a man be humble enough to share where he's struggling and where he's wrestling with insecurity or wrestling with fear or anger, and admit those feelings instead of just shoving them down and pretending like they don't exist. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. And it hasn't been all bad. There have been, I think I've had a couple of people who have said to me, the way that you are unafraid to be yourself has really helped me and change the way that I think about things. So I think there is pain that comes with being different, or choosing to express yourself differently. But there could be somebody out there who's like, just feels like they're trapped and, oh, well, there's no way I could ever wear this floral shirt because I don't ever see any guys wearing a floral shirt. That must mean I can't. And so I think it's so encouraging to be able to be that person. It's like validating that person and giving that person permission in a way to be themselves. So yeah, that is the cool part.
Yeah. I think that's the most masculine thing. One of the most masculine things you could do is giving people permission to be themselves, bring themselves, all of themselves to a setting, whether it's a one-on-one setting or a group setting, and help lower the guards, lower the insecurities of somebody entering, especially if it's like a new situation. So that's something I've always appreciated in my life. Sometimes there've just been these gateway men who have helped me just like feel included, ushered in and included. And that's just been a lifesaver many times over. So I appreciate that a lot. Well, Andrew, this was so lovely. It was so lovely to learn a little bit about your story. Like I literally only knew like the bare bones that you once lived in Ohio and now you don't. And it was so nice to be able to like learn more about you, both for a podcast audience, but then certainly just for a one-on-one friendship, just to learn more about who you are and how you've gotten here. Yeah. And so thanks for just being so vulnerable. My hope above all hopes is that by sharing your story, you have given somebody listening permission to at least entertain the idea of leaving home Not that we're trying to create runaways. We're not trying to create runaways. If you're underage, stay at home until you're of age. But if you're an adult who has the ability to move out or change up your living situation, if you're in a place, I don't know, that's stealing more of your life than giving it to you, like, at least I hope this conversation really does give them permission to just at least consider it. Consider, if you were going to leave, where would you go? If all things were paved for you, like, where would you go? What would bring you life? What would make you smile? What would make you have a nice, deep, contented sigh at the end of the day? Like, where would that be, both geographically and existentially? And I don't know, maybe this gives some permission, because it's not that crazy anymore. Like, maybe it was crazy 100 years ago to move across the country, but I don't think it's crazy to a degree, but it's not uncommon at all. And I think, again, you're a prime example of that. And so it's really cool to see you taking those steps. I hope things keep going well for you out there in SoCal. I can't wait to visit again.
Thanks. Yeah. Can't wait to have you visit.
I'll sleep on the ottoman that's in the closet. I'll just lay down on that.
Just curl up in a little ball.
Save that for me. It's like a rollaway bed. Yeah, exactly. So listeners, if you have any thoughts about Andrew's episode, go over to our podcast episode page, go to yourotherbrothers.com/podcast and find Andrew's ConvoCast and leave us a story. Tell us a story, ask us some questions. Have you moved away from home? Are you considering it? Are you not considering it? What's holding you back? Like, all of those things. I would love to learn more about that. And especially as it pertains to moving for people. I mean, that's something that I'm going to keep my eye on. I mean, I'm going to keep an eye on it in my own life, but even as the years go by, and I've already had a vantage point on this for a few years now, of yobbers kind of relocating and moving around, even like moving in together and sharing a living space with each other. Like, that's happening more and more often as the years go by. And so, I don't know, the internet's an awful place, but the internet's also a great place to find people with common values and common, all the building blocks of friendship. So, moving somewhere for people, more so than a job, more so than, all the other things that people move places to, but moving because you know that you're going to be loved and welcomed, and you may even get to experience that sense of being at home there. I think that's a great reason to move somewhere. So
yeah,
I hope that inspires some people. Thanks for just being honest and sharing where you're at, Andrew. I'm curious to see where your journey leads.
You and me both.
Let me know when the house falls out of the sky with the deed next to it and you can move in and get your own house.
All right. I will be sure. You'll be the first person I tell.
We've manifested it.
Exactly.
We've manifested it to the Lord. Well, we'll do this again, Andrew. I'm glad we were able to talk. Well, again, we'll keep an eye out for Heartstopper season 3 as well. We'll have you back and analyze all the goings on. Can't wait. All right, friends. Until we gather at home once again.
Bye.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home.
Like I said, my plan is to talk to Daniel in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if it's going to be the next episode or a couple eepisodes from now, but
yeah, that'll be a juicy episode.
I can't wait. Because I was there. Were you there on that painting night? You were there, right? When we painted? Because the whole time I was like, this just feels like the most natural thing in the world that they're partaking in this with us. These two straight. Like, I met them briefly, but I didn't have a single conversation with them that whole time that I was there that night. It's like, this is just a normal thing for them that we're all just painting, a bunch of mostly queer men just painting in the living room, and they're joining us. Like, what is this? I don't know what this is, but here we are.
Right. Yeah. You'll have to ask him about the time that he put all his pots and pans under his bed.
Whoa. Teaser. I'm going to have to write that down. Pots and pans under his bed. Okay.
Yes.
I will
It's
ask.
a hilarious story.
Okay. I'm going to write that down. I literally will not. I don't want to forget this. Do you think he would have naturally brought that up or no?
I don't know. Maybe. But maybe not. So I'm just going to give it a gentle nudge.
I love that. Yeah. What a great teaser.